Civilization 6 releases tomorrow, Scott Butterworth, and you have played a full match, probably about 12 hours, you'd say, at this point?
Yeah, well, I played a full 500 turns, so yeah, it took about 12 hours.
And you won, though. You got a score victory, correct?
I did, yeah. I was like pursuing both culture and science through most of the game because a lot of those technologies went hand in hand. So I was the leader for both, but I wasn't able to complete either one. So I just won by score at the end.
Gotcha, right.
Yeah.
And so this isn't like a review in progress like we normally do. We want to do an Ask the Reviewer because this is a massive game, obviously. Civilization, these are games that people play for like hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
Myself, I played Civ 5 like, 400 something. And I'm sure I know you've played a lot of the Civilization games as well. So you're reviewing it. We just wanted to do an early impressions right now because we just got code like a day before review embargo, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I've only completed one full game, like you said, in the final build. I mean, we've been seeing the game for months leading up to today, so we know quite a bit about it. But yeah, this is our first time playing the final build of the game, and yeah, I beat it. I beat one full game, which was about 12 hours of gameplay. So there's a lot to wrap your head around. There's a lot just that I've learned from this one playthrough that I will apply to future playthroughs that will kind of determine how much I actually enjoy the experience in the end once I've like learned all these important lessons from failing during my first attempt at the game.
Oh, exactly. That's like part of the process for these games. And so I want to start with like broad strokes. How did that playthrough feel?
I mean, so they've added a lot, they've changed a lot, but Civ is still Civ. It is one of the most engrossing experiences. I mean, I assume people watching this video already know what Civ is, but if you happen to stumble into this, it's a classic 4X strategy game. You know, it's all about building a civilization from the ground up, founding cities, building units, exploring the world, trying not to be slaughtered by your neighbors. And so it's the kind of game that's just, it's the epitome of just one more turn, just one more turn, just one more turn. I was here in the office until 3:30 a.m. last night, kind of on accident. Like kind of on purpose because I knew that I needed to play as much of the game as possible.
You looked up and realized you should probably be sleeping?
Yep, it was absolutely one. I mean, that's such a cliche, but I mean, that is quite literally what happened.
Yeah.
And so Civ is still Civ despite the changes. And I'm happy to report that, you know, I think people will, getting into the series, will find a lot of like the classic pillars still intact. Veteran players will find new things to love, but still feel that this is at its core a Civilization game.
So of the major changes, how do those feel? Like the unstacking cities, the active research, the hidden agendas with leaders, have those like affected your playthrough as much as they're supposedly supposed to?
All right, let's talk about those in order. So the unstacking cities was probably the biggest change in the way you play the game moment to moment. It used to be that you kind of got to focus on macro level strategy, right? You kind of pick the technologies you're pursuing, you set up some structure that you're building in a city, and you kind of let it go and you let it run. With unstacking the cities, each turn becomes a lot more active. You have a lot more to kind of manage and plan in the short term. You have to be looking 5 and 10 turns ahead instead of just 100, 150 turns ahead. I mean, you still need to be looking down further into the future, but because the way the cities are now set up, you really manage things in a different way. For example, there's now amenities and housing. So there used to be like global happiness and global food levels. That has now been shrunk to a much more micro level, and it's managed on an individual city basis as opposed to like your civilization as a whole.
Right.
So a lot of the game was, oh man, like I'm running out of space to expand in this city. I have to provide more housing or the city will stagnate and the production will stop and I won't continue to grow. Or, oh, the people are becoming unhappy because there aren't enough amenities. I have to build something to keep them happy so that I can then build the stuff that's going to advance the civilization as a whole. It really shifts the focus of your moment-to-moment investment in the game.
And there are all these adjacency bonuses with the unstacked city tiles, right? I mean, like you'll get bonuses from putting a campus district next to mountains, I believe. So then when you get an astronomy tower or something, like this is all like kind of just general terms. But then like
there's so
you have
much
to
to
think
learn.
about like you don't want to take that space up for like 100 turns later when you want to put an industrial tile.
Oh my God, this is one of the most important lessons I learned of just not knowing necessarily what a building's going to require, because there are a bunch of buildings that are, you know, legacy, they've just been in the game forever. They now kind of have new, not requirements necessarily, but benefits from certain adjacencies and things like that. And I didn't know that in every case, and so I had to like demolish certain hexes so I could build something somewhere specific. Or in some cases, I actually couldn't build what I needed to build because I had already placed something in a position where it couldn't be removed or demolished, and it was just like, oh, I can't build this thing in this city now, I have to find somewhere else to build this. So yeah, you really have to be planning ahead, and it's a little unfortunate coming into it and not knowing what each and every one of those is first time through, because I kind of screwed myself without realizing it, and it's you know, oh well, but now I know for the future. But yeah, there's just a lot more nuance. I mean, I think overall what they've kind of done is focused on the truly important aspects of the game, but dived really deep into them. So they've kind of eliminated or pared down some of the really ancillary stuff, but other things they have streamlined but made deeper. That's so generic and it's such a general explanation, but I think when people play the game, they'll understand what I mean. And amenities is maybe a good example of that. I mean, it's just something, or unstacking the cities, that, those aspects of the game and happiness and food, they've been in there, but now they're presented in a different way that actually kind of makes more sense, but also demands more strategy.
Right. So then another one of the changes we mentioned was the active research, which kind of strikes me as almost one of the new side quest systems, because there are these things you can pursue to either boost this science research or this new technology development, but also sometimes you'll do something on accident and then this new tech will get a 50% boost. You're like, shit, I might as well go down that part of the path now and maybe get to like rifleman quicker. Can you talk about the active research?
Yeah. So I mean, exactly as you described. Civilization is all about you have to progress your civilization through learning new technologies, and with each new technology you can build new units and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff.
Through either like facilitating a scientific win or just pushing toward like a cultural win with like these specific techs.
Yeah. But as you said, each new technology you can research and each new civic you can research, which we'll get into in a minute, has a specific caveat or something about it that if you meet that requirement, it takes half the amount of time to unlock it. So half can mean like 10 to 20 turns reduced. That's such an amazing time saver, and it really will allow you to leapfrog ahead of your opponents if you can meet those requirements. So in certain cases, I found myself going out of my way to pursue a certain civic so that it would reduce the time it would take to unlock a certain technology or things like that. It does impact the way you strategize. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do the exact same thing every time. I know this technology is going to let me build this unit, therefore I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to that immediately. You kind of have to play it by ear because certain things just kind of come up organically. And as you pointed out, that is one of the just wonderful, fantastic things about Civ. It really does reward different playstyles and allow you to win in different ways. Like I said, I was pursuing a cultural and scientific victory. I built almost no military units whatsoever the entire game. I barely upgraded anything. My cities were practically unprotected. I made friends with everybody through trade and diplomacy and just didn't focus on military, which let me focus instead on science. So, I mean, again, one of the things that's just beautiful about Civ.
One of the things that I have noticed from my time playing the preview builds of the game, I think I've played about 15 hours of the game at this point. I've only finished one playthrough like you at this point, but the Barbarians seemed both more aggressive and abundant. Is that, I mean, you've only played one playthrough as well, so maybe next time the new map will kind of mitigate their presence, but how do you feel?
They are super obnoxious. I mean, obviously, Barbarians have been part of this series since day one. I mean, so they are one of the original ideas. But they are not only smarter, they're more prevalent, and they seem to just pop up out of nowhere, and they don't go away the entire game. There is an option to turn Barbarians off completely, but I really wish there was an option to just reduce the number of Barbarians, because the first probably 50 to 75 turns of the game was just like, oh my god, I want to get started, but I have to fight off this stupid Barbarian over and over. Like, no, their scout shows up out of nowhere. Like, it's just... That was the focus of the game during the early chapters, which was... I don't know, kind of annoying. To me, that's not the fun part of the game. That's like, having to swat a fly. It's just this annoyance that's buzzing around. And
right.
Yeah, I wish they reduced that. There were a few other annoyances as well. And I do characterize them as annoyances. Most of the things I encountered that I didn't like were on the smaller side.
Sure.
Or just were smaller issues in general. A lot of it was just weird UI stuff that I might need to get used to. Like hovering over stuff in a menu will cause a drop-down menu to open, but then that blocks everything beneath it, and there's really no way to avoid it, so I end up having to move the cursor around, stupid little things like that. There are also some weird, I wouldn't describe them as technical hiccups, but things like I will click on the technology tree, and the game will kind of freeze up for a second before it opens. There was an instance where I got this warning that France was about to win through a cultural victory, but then I checked the world score, and they clearly weren't, so I don't know what that was about. Yeah, it was very strange.
Dang.
There are a few minor annoyances like that I'm going to dig into more in the text. So if anybody is watching this video on the review and progress page, you can read the text to read more about exactly what I'm talking about.
Sure. And then one more thing I want to touch on before I just ask you kind of closing broad questions.
Sure.
The civics, how are those working this time around? Because you mentioned them and you said you wanted to get into them.
Yeah. So again, it's an idea that's kind of been in the game for a while, or at least since Civ 5. I mean, social policies were kind of a big part of Civ 5. Right. They're now presented basically exactly the same way as technology. They operate in perfect parallel to technology. You research them the same way. It takes approximately the same amount of time. It benefits you in a lot of the same ways. Like, you'll unlock new governments through civic research as opposed through technological research.
Sure.
So it's now presented identically, just different stuff. And it actually makes logical sense to like separate the two. I mean, a hard technical scientific advancement is not the same thing as a civic advancement necessarily. So separating them into two different pools that sort of function identically actually makes a lot of sense and makes the social policies just kind of more understandable and feel a bit more integrated into the experience.
Sure.
So I like that they did that. That was a smart choice.
Cool. It's just kind of further adding to, like you said, it's a very much more active game overall, right?
Totally.
That's the one last question I kind of want to ask you is, I think one big thing with Civ games, a lot of times that first 150 turns is always the most fun. And then you, like, sometimes the mid game can get pretty boring. Sometimes the late game victory rush gets really boring when people are all just, like, settling up, hoping they get to that last turn to build the space station or, like, you know, found the World Bank first. But how did the flow of this game feel? I know it was only one playthrough, so you can't speak to the overall game. But for this playthrough, how did, like, the beginning, middle, end feel as opposed to, like, Civ 5, say?
No, it is important to point out, as you just did, that this was a single playthrough, and I pursued a particular type of victory, so that's going to impact the way the game flowed. That said, I agree with something you pointed out like a month ago when we were talking about the game, which is that the mid-game turns are definitely more active and exciting than they have been in previous games. Cool. However, I did still hit the same kind of grind towards the end where I was just like, okay, I'm clearly going to win. I just need to keep going. I need to, like, just hopefully no weird curveball, like nobody nukes me out of nowhere or something. So I just had to grind through it. Like, I was building a space station and just needed to finish. It needed to get through the turn so it would actually complete. So I do feel like the particular playthrough that I had didn't really crescendo in a meaningful way, but it still contained a lot of those like hallmark big emotional moments of a Civ game of just like when you start out just feeling so overwhelmed by the world and like overwhelmed by the possibilities of it and getting really excited when your strategy starts to pay off and you start to see things actually get built and things like that. So a lot of those beats are still in there, even if it did kind of grind to a halt towards the end.
Sure. Okay, cool. So, I mean, obviously it's a civilization game. You have a lot to parse through. You've played about 12 hours. You have a lot more to play before you go like full review. But
totally,
at the time of this video being published, you have a review in progress up on the site. You'll be able to hear more in-depth your thoughts on those first 12 hours. But until next time, I'm sure you'll be playing a lot, and then we can kind of hear your final thoughts at some point.
Yeah, sometime next week, more than likely. I mean, again, it's a game you play for hundreds of hours, which I don't know how many hundreds of hours I have to put into this during holiday season, but I'm excited to play more. Definitely excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to play too. Thanks so much, Scott.
Absolutely.